Alright, so in this video we're going to create a Piet Mondrian inspired painting. Piet Mondrian is best known for Broadway Boogie Woogie from the 1940s. It's a very geometric abstract painting using usually simple square and rectangle type geometry. Your painting does not have to be any one of those his particular paintings, just something inspired from that era. So in Photoshop, we'll create a basic print quality 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper going through File, New, and uh, you are going to use layers to primarily create this image. So once you have your image created, on the right hand side here we have a bunch of different channels, but we have layers, channels, paths, and so on. Um, when you ever create something by default in Photoshop, it automatically gives you a background. This is kind of a flat baseline background. It kind of feels it kind of comes from old, I would like to say it's inspired from old animation days. So transparent layers, which is what we're going to be doing, are kind of like the old animation method of painting on transparent mylar sheets and then painting them onto a background. Think like the old Warner Brothers or Disney cartoons, which would be generally much more complicated paintings. So they'd have the character, they paint the animation cells, and then they would pull off the transparent ones and put another one down for the next frame, for example. So it kind of has that history, um, but it's the thing is, now that you're in the digital era, the background is no different than any other layer. It's kind of burned in by default, just to keep it kind of simple and locked down. So if you want to convert the background into a layer, all you have to do over here is on the right hand side is double click on the background. When you double click on the background, it will open up and change it into something called new layer. This just converts it from a background image into a new layer. Now, what's the difference between the background and the new layer? Again, very minimal at this point, but there is one key difference. Whenever you erase something on the background, it erased to whatever the color is in your background color on the left hand side in your toolbox. If you erase something on a layer, it'll erase to transparency. So if I were to switch to the eraser tool by hitting the E key, come in here on the E key, and you can see my default eraser settings might be different than yours, but mine's a very feathered large brush. But if no matter what your settings are, it should do the same thing. It should erase. If I come in here and start erasing, it will erase to transparent little gray and white squares. That's how Photoshop denotes transparency. So if you're to save this out as something a file that supports transparency, such as PNGs or something, this would not show up. It'd be gone. The little transparency. So again, the little gray squares would denote transparency. If I were to paint back on here in any color, paint white. Sorry, I gotta switch back to the brush tool, B key, Bravo key, and paint on here. You can see I can paint back. So why do we do this? The main reason is, well, it's okay to have a background. In fact, I'm probably going to leave this one alone, but I just wanted to use this experience to talk about the difference between layers and the background color. But the thing is, you can stack lots of these layers on, and that's when the real magic happens. Now, there are like 4 or 5 different ways to create layers in Photoshop. I'm going to cover just a few of them. So for starters, you can create a layer by going up to Layers, New, Layer, very first one on the list. And right there next to it, you can see the quick keys, which how I usually do it, is Shift Control N. I haven't created a layer yet, but showing you. Another way you can create a layer is down here in the very bottom right, there's a little paper icon. If you click on this, this will also create a new layer. And the last way that I think I'm going to talk about making layers is if you click on this little horizontal lines right here, these 3 or 4 horizontal lines. One of the first options here is also new layer. And again, Shift Control N is the quick key. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. And you'll get a dialog that looks something like this. Now, there's a lot of things you can do with this. Like you can start off changing the type of mode it is, how opaque it is, give it a name. You can like organize things into layers. There's all kinds of things you can do here. I generally don't bother with any of these default settings. I leave them alone because I can change these later. So there's a lot of ways of doing that, and that's generally how I work. I don't bother naming them yet because I honestly might throw it away after 5 minutes of working on it. So I don't waste my time naming things. But organization is important. So if you want to name things, go ahead. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK. And you'll see it creates a layer here on the right hand side. Now we have two layers. We have layer 0, which used to be the background, and layer 1. And what this does is allows me to switch back and forth between these two layers now, and I can activate that layer. And if I choose to do any sort of operation, such as previously discussed marquee tools, the brush tools, those kinds of things, they will go on whatever layer has selected. So you do have to start paying attention to your layers over here now. So for example, if I come in here with the Marquee tool, the M key, or come up here into the toolbox and select on the little square here and draw a box and fill that box with a color, and to fill your background or your marquee with a color, once again I'm going to pick a color. Right now it's set to white, and that's fine if that's what you wanted. Or if we can swap these, let's click on those arrows here or hit the X key. So I can swap back and forth between these two by tapping the X key on the keyboard or clicking on these little arrows. I can do black. Or if you don't want it to be any of those colors, you can click on one of these swatches. There's multiple ways of doing it. This is how I usually do it. Click on a swatch and change the color to whatever you want. Now, if you're doing the Piet Mondrian inspired painting, I do advise that you work with a limited color palette. So don't make a lot of different colors. Just, maybe pick like 2 or 3 based on a color theory theme, or primaries, or a triadic color theme. Just feel free to just kind of look at something, or just pick your 3 favorite colors, but keep it limited, not counting black and white. Maybe 3 colors. Granted, I'm not saying you don't have to do that. I've seen plenty of people push this kind of painting much farther and get interesting results. That's just a bit of advice if you're not sure. So I'm going to pick this bright blue. Maybe I'll change it later. But I'll pick this bright blue. I'm going to hit OK. So I've changed that black to a bright blue color. Now I'm going to fill in here this marquee fill. And again, if you guys remember, there's a lot of different ways to do this. We can go up to Edit and Fill, which also is the quick key Shift F5, which I don't think I covered in my previous videos, which is a different quick key. The quick key I usually use is Shift Backspace on a Windows PC, which opens up a dialog that looks something like this. Now, your settings may be different if you've never done this before. By default, it may say Content Aware under Contents. You're going to want to change this to either foreground or background color. And again, all the differences between foreground and background color on this is that first little square over here on the left is the foreground color, and the square back here is the background color. And most digital painters tend to keep the contents on foreground or background color. If you're doing like photo manipulation, Content Aware is a very popular one. And sometimes you come back to these other ones when needed. They're very specialized after that. So I'm going to keep mine on foreground color. So I know my foreground's blue. Hit OK. And I'm going to paint. And there you go. You can see we have this blue square on here now. Now the blue square can be used on either different layers, or you can use this same layer to move it around. So before, what we were doing is we were using the Marquee tool, just moving it around on the layer. But now that we have it separated on its own layer, I don't technically have to select this anymore, while it's like this at least. So if I hit Control D, and decide to move this around, I can. Now, I'm not sure if we referenced the move tool before, because we have never had anything to move, either with a selection, or in this case, on its own layer. I can use the move tool, hit the V key, Victor key, and you can see that the move tool is changed here. And I can drag and move this around now. I can move it around, as you can see here. I can move this around as such. So moving this around using the V key can be done because it's on different layers, and I don't have to worry about having a selection made. Granted, I can still do that. I can come here and make a selection, hit the V key and move it. That will work. But I'm just saying that there is no need to do that if it's the only element or you're trying to move the entire layer. You don't have to have anything selected. So already we can kind of move this around. And again, being on the move tool, I'm just grabbing this with the left mouse and dragging it and moving it around. But you can also, if you want to be precise, you can see how Photoshop's trying to snap things here. So you can see maybe I can snap it up into the top left corner. It's kind of wants to snap. That can be turned on and off, but I'm not going to show that just yet in this video. But you can see how it snaps. But you can also move layers or selections, things that you have selected, by using the arrow keys on your keyboard, and you can nudge it pixel by pixel. So if I tap the right button, right arrow button on the keyboard, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can move it 5 pixels. I hit it 5 more times here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can say I can move it. I moved it, a total of 10 pixels to the right. Do I have to be this accurate? No, but if you want to be, you're trying to be precise, have precision, you have that capability. And a lot of this particular exercise is kind of trying to keep things a little more precise. Also, you can add shift and hit an arrow, and it will move it in increments of 10s. So for in this case, if I hit shift and down arrow, it'll jump 10 pixels. So you can see it's jumping by a certain number there. And I'm just kind of looking at it, and you can see there. We'll talk about rulers and guides probably a little bit later, but for right now, I think this is good enough. You can either just use the arrow key and eyeball it, or use shift and the corresponding arrow keys to move it in increments of generally 10 pixels. It depends on what the file size is. So there you go. You can see it's moving around. Now the great thing is I can create more shapes. For example, I'm just going to create a new layer. Control Shift N. Again, that's my quick key for creating a new layer. And again, I'm not going to bother renaming these just yet. And I'm going to create a new layer. It's blank. And I'm just going to pick a different color. I'm not sure which color yet. Maybe I'll go with like a yellowish color. Maybe I'll stick to more pastel-y colors, I think, for this one. Pastel yellow. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to make another selection. I'm just going to draw a marquee. Again, M for Marquee Tool. Draw marquee out. And I'm going to go ahead and fill this. So Shift Backspace. Once again, foreground color. And hit OK. And I'm going to hit Control D to deselect because I don't really need, because I'm working mostly with layers. I don't need to see the marching ants too much, which is the nickname that somebody gave to the marquee selections, and it has stuck all this time. So now I have these 3 layers. One is the white background, one is the blue box, and one is the yellow box here. I can nudge these around, and the great thing with layers is, if needed, which is perhaps not as important on this assignment, is I can move these on top of each other and have them again like transparent pictures on paintings. So you can see I can grab them, move them around, and they'll be on top of each other. Now you can also change the order of the layers at any point in time. If I drag one of these layers by left clicking and holding, I can drag these, and you'll wait until you see those little 2 blue lines, and to know that you're going to be moving that object between, underneath that one, or in this case between these 2. So you can see I moved it. Now the blue one is on top of the yellow one. Click and hold, drag it there, and you can see it drags it back up and creates that layer there. Put that layer there. So you can totally move these around. You can have them on top of each other or move them however you need to. And you can see again, like one great thing is Photoshop is always trying to create a it's trying to keep measures your thing. It's not as good as maybe say a layout program like Illustrator or InDesign, but it does have some built-in automatic layout type functions right there. As you can see, it's trying to keep the spacing the same, for example, which is great for this assignment, really. And if you ever do UI work, user interface work, it's great for that too. All right, so I have these 2 pieces here. We could go out and redraw these again, but honestly, for this kind of style painting, you're probably going to want to keep a lot of these squares the same. You're probably going to first design, you're going to have to find out your pattern, but you're going to have some patterns be designed out and you're going to keep a lot of the squares the same, or very similar in size. So for example, maybe I want this yellow square to be 2 of them, and I think I'm off, but I can fix that later. Maybe I want 2 of these squares to be the exact same size. Now I could duplicate this layer instead of having to draw out a new one. And to duplicate, there's a couple different ways of doing this. For example, with the layer selected, we can go up to Layer, Duplicate Layer. That will work. And it'll duplicate the layer right in the exact same spot as that one. So you can see there's 2 layers there, but they're both right on top of each other, so you don't see anything. So again, if I use the arrow key, the move tool, which is the V key, if you don't have it on, you can move it around. So you can see me, I'm just grabbing the move, and this brings up some interesting ideas. Like I just did it without even thinking about it, but if you start dragging and moving around, that's great. But if you hold down Shift when you start moving it, it will lock to a whatever direction you start dragging. If you remember when we talked about the brush tool or the pencil tool, if you hold down Shift and start dragging, it will only go in the direction you initially start dragging it. It's the same idea. So if you hold down Shift and you start dragging something, it will only go left or right if that's the direction you start grabbing it. Or if you start going upwards and downwards, it will only go up and down. So maybe I'll do something like this or drag it down like this. I don't know if that's what I'm going to do, but you can see I'm moving it down as such. I just made a copy of it. So there you go. We got that. And you can see we have these layers here. Another way you can make a copy of a layer, and this is, I'm going to go to the blue square in my example here to do this, is this is the way I generally do it, is with the layer selected and you're on the move tool, you can hold on the Alt key and drag, and it automatically makes a copy of it. You can see there, I dragged that over there. So if I'm holding down the Alt key while using the move tool, it makes a copy of it and creates a brand new layer of it as you go. So that's like a little quick key to make things faster. You can see I go right across there by holding on the Alt key. And you can do this with multiple layers. So let's say if I grab both of these blue square layers, and again, to grab, the great thing is to grab multiple things in your layers, it works the exact same way as the Marquee tools. We talked about how you add to selections and take away from selections using the Shift key. It's the exact same for layers. So if I hold down Shift, I can select both layers. Now please note, if I'm up here and I want the layer below it, it's going to select all the layers. Hold on Shift like that, it does that. If you need gaps between your layers, that is the Control key. So if you want gaps between your layers, if you want to have a gap, you can use Control also to add to your selections. And then clicking on it on and off, it just repeats. It's a toggle selection. Oops, getting ahead of myself there. Don't want to do that. Double clicking on a layer brings up that window. If you get that, please dismiss it. All right, so if I have these 2 layers selected and I hold down Alt key, which means as soon as I start dragging, I'm going to make a copy, and I hold down Shift, I'm going to drag these two down here. So you can see I got something like this, and I don't know if that looks good, but I'm just going to go with that for right now, because again, just purpose of the exercise. And you can see I'm creating a lot of layers here. And this can get kind of chaotic pretty quickly. I have all these blue cubes right here in this layer here, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. I don't mind it, but you're gonna get more and more layers, and it will scroll. It does have a scrolling list, but it does bring up an opportunity to talk about grouping. You can use groups for a lot of things, but the primary thing that you use it for is layer organization. So we can group layers. In my case, my strategy here is going to group all the same type of elements in the same type of group, just to keep it a little more organized. To create a group, all you have to do is select your at least 2 or more layers, and use Control G. Now there might be a way to do it through the menus. I forget. If I come up to probably layers, and in fact I don't know where it is, because like I said, me and my quick keys. I love my quick keys. There we go. You go over to the lines on the right hand side. You can see new group. So Control G. So select them, Control G, and it will put them in a group. Now this group, currently, if you see the little chevron pointing to the right, it's closed. It just means it's a visual close and opened. And so I click on the chevron, you can see I open and close the group. If you ever want to rename anything, layer or group, and this might be a little trickier than it should be for Photoshop, you have to double click on the words, literally the letters. You have to hit the characters. If you double click anywhere else, you're going to get a different thing. So if I, for example, if I double click on the blue, one of these blue squares letters here, it says layer, in my case, layer 1, copy 2. I can double click on the letters and I can change this to blue square or whatever you want to change it to. Group, I'm just going to change this one to double click on the group at the letters, and I'm just going to change this to blue squares. So if you want to try to be more organized, that's fine. Now, do you have to rename everything? No, you don't have to rename everything. But since I'm making groups, I'm gonna name the groups to help my organization here. Now, these groups, the great thing is these groups work like layers. So if I grab this group and hit the V key and drag it around, I can move the entire group as well. I don't need to. I'm not going to, but you can mess with an entire group. So you can see how we can mess with the groups or the layers to change things. Maybe I will go ahead and select these two and I'll group these together. So I'll select both of them, held down Shift, Control G. I'm going to make another group. Call this one, in my case, yellow squares. And so on. All right, I'm going to go ahead and create one more square to play with here. So I'm going to go hit Control Shift N to create a new layer. And just because of where I was positioned, it put this empty layer in this group. I don't want it in this group. I want it by itself. So what to do is how to move it out of the group is kind of similar to how you move layers to begin with. You just got to be careful where you drag and let go to. So I'm going to click and hold on this layer. I'm going to drag up, and you can see I get to those double lines. An encapsulated line where it's a circle, like a square like that, means you're dragging into. I don't want to drag it into the group. I want to take it out of the group. So a double line right there means I'm dragging it out of or in between something. Like that. So now it is outside. If I wanted to drag it back into the yellow squares just to showcase, so maybe you missed something in your group, you need to add it to the group, you drag to that area, and you can see right there, this will work. So I'll drag it into that group, and technically dragging it like here would work. And if you were going to the blue one, you wanted to go into the blue group, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to just drag it around. So I'm going to go ahead and make a green square, I think. Maybe an orange, I haven't decided yet. I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to go with something orange, or a little warmer. This may be awful. That's okay. That's the great thing about Photoshop is you can change it later. I'm going to do a perfect square for this one. So again, remember to draw marquees. If you want to draw a perfect square, just hold down Shift while you're drawing it. You'll make a perfect square. So I'm holding down Shift while I'm drawing the marquee select. And then I'm going to fill this. Once again, Shift Backspace. Foreground color. Okay. Control D to deselect because I'm using layers to move this stuff around. So you can see, there we go. We have this square right here. And you can see I can already start off. I'm going to maybe drag this over here and create another one. And all I'm doing is holding out Alt and Shift to drag that square. I don't like that positioning. Now here comes the part where I start refining everything. All I'm using is my nudging tools. So I'm selecting the layer and using the arrows on my keyboard and moving these around. And then I'm going to probably mess with this one up here. Get myself a pattern here real quick. I'm messing with the spacing right here. I think my yellow one's a little too thick. So I'm actually gonna take these away. To delete a layer, all you need to do is select it, and you can check to see which one it is by click on the little eyeballs to turn on and off layers, which is something you can do even if you want to keep it. Sometimes you might want to hide something. But I'm just checking to see which one it is. Delete, and then I don't want this one either, so I'm gonna delete for right now. So I'm just kind of simplifying this back because I'm kind of blocking out a pattern here. So if we look at this, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit by hitting Control+, you can see I'm a little off. You know, I'm a little off here and there. And again, this is the only assignment really where I want you to have this level of precision, you know, to be mindful of it, because it will help you down the road if you ever need to. So for example, I can see that this is not aligned with this. And there are line tools. I'm not gonna go into those right now. So I'm just gonna use the arrow keys. So I'm gonna select both these squares, and I'm just gonna use the arrow keys and move it up. And then maybe I will bring the yellow one, and because it's not aligned here, so I'll click on the yellow square and move it up. And that's pretty good, actually. I thought the spacing would be bad here. It's not the same, but I'm okay with that spacing. Granted, if I wanted to make these not be perfect, in fact, what I should do, you know, I think I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this over. So this is the same, and I'll bring this blue one over so it's the same. Again, Piet Mondrian had very geometric, precise things. You don't have to be this precise, but you know, if the thing is, you want to be clear about what you're doing. Either you want it to be precise, or you want it to be obvious that you're not going for that level of precision. So that's what I say in animation and a lot of disciplines. Either be sure it's right, or don't be close. Don't try to be close, because then it might look off. So with this, now that you know I've adjusted the spacing on these ones up here, I need to fix the yellow one. So there's two ways I can do this. I can use the Marquee tool and maybe select. I'll make sure on that layer, draw a marquee selection here, and you can see I'm just kind of matching that orange. I'm on the yellow. I'm just going to straight up hit the backspace key. The other way you can do this, which delete that part, I'm going to Control D to deselect. The other way you can do this is with that layer selected or a selection made. We can talk about a new tool that I have not spoken before. And that is the Control T, which is the quick key for transform. In the menu, I believe it is under select, or is it under edit? See, again, me and my quick keys. I love my quick keys. Don't even know where it is up there in the menu anymore. So if you hit Control T or Command T on a Mac, so if you hit Control T with the correct layer, or whatever layer you want to manipulate, or a selection, you bring up a transform gizmo, and that will look something like this. The transform gizmo allows you to do various things, such as rotate it, scale it, and distort it. So these squares can be grabbed by a corner and manipulated by universally scale as a Photoshop, well, CC, but I can't remember which year this changed. If you have an older version of Photoshop, the default might be non-uniform scale. They just reversed it. What they did is, if you want to uniformly scale it or do the other one, if it's doing something different, it's holding down the Shift key. So if you want to transform it, you hold down the Shift key. And if you're on an older version of Photoshop, it's going to be the exact opposite. If you want to make it perfect, then it's hold down the Shift key. So there you go. And you can see it's automatically trying to snap too, which is kind of nice. So again, you can grab one of those corners, and depending on which version of Photoshop you're on, hold down Shift or don't hold Shift if you want to distort it or keep it perfect the way it was. The other thing you can do with the transform tool is, if you move your mouse to one of the outer corners, you can rotate it, though not really needed for this assignment, is you can rotate it however you want. You can see it's rotating degrees. If you hold down Shift while doing this, it locks into, I believe, 15-degree increments? No, 30-degree increments. Nope, 15. I was correct the first time. 15-degree increments. We don't necessarily need that one, but I'm taking the opportunity to show you that because we're here. When you are happy with this, you hit Return. If you don't like what you did, you can hit the Escape key. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Enter / Return, and there you go. You can see I kind of got this initial piece pretty blocked in. You can see there we go. You have this section here. So now, and you can take this as far as you want, but for the purposes of the length of the assignment, I'm not gonna do any more pattern breakdowns. I believe you guys probably would want to, you know, really to capture that Piet Mondrian style painting. You really want to try to break it down a little farther as much as you can. If you look at some of these, they break it down. But again, for the purposes of length of the video, we're gonna assume this is good enough. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select all of these, In fact, maybe I should put these in a group first. Select those two layers, Control G, orange squares. And I'm going to go ahead and select all those groups, or you could select individual layers if you didn't have groups. And I'm just going to grab them and move them. And again, if you want to make a copy, hold down Alt. And what this will do is it will make duplicate groups, but that's okay. You can see I have these groups. Maybe I'll do something with this, like that. Maybe I'll put that down there. And yes, I am making excess groups, which is a little messy, but whatever. So let's not do that. Let's go ahead and make a copy, but let's keep this original thing as groups, but let's merge all these into one component so I don't have to worry about having all these groups. So you can merge any layers that you have selected or groups of layers you have selected by having them selected and going to the merge layers option. Again, I use the quick keys. The quick key is Control E, but if you want to go through the layers, you go up to layers and merge layers. There it is, Control E. So layers, merge layer. Or over here, the lines, merge layers. So again, Control E is the quick key, and it will merge all these together. So these are now one layer. So I hit Control E, and you can see I can't individually select these pieces anymore because I've merged them all together. And like for this, this is how I would typically work. I would probably keep something that's more, broken down, but those elements, I'm not gonna, if it's repeating, I'm probably gonna merge them myself. But that's just my personal thing. So I make another copy here. Maybe I will reverse this one, or maybe I'll rotate it. And now we can actually use the transform tool in a practical manner. Maybe I'll select this layer and I'll hit Control T, and I'll hold down Shift, go to the outside corner. You can see where you see the crosshairs changing that little arrows, circular arrows. And again, holding down Shift locks the increments into 15 degrees. And I'll rotate this, something like that. I hit Return. Maybe I'll put this right here. You can see I'm a little off now. Suddenly I'm going to worry about that, but again, I can't fix everything for the length of this exercise, unfortunately, because these weren't perfect squares. And that was a mistake I did very early on. I didn't make those perfect squares. So I'm just going to cheat. I'm going to select that layer and Control T. Still not perfect squares, but do better than I did. So you can see we have some layers here, and again, I'm just going to move through this because I we got some stuff to go. So this is not going to be perfect. I'm going to go ahead and scale a few of these around. Maybe I'll do that again. Hold down Shift. But I'm just going to make something here real quick. Maybe I'll go ahead and again, I'm just copying these layers, selecting them, deleting them. Maybe I'll make this one bigger. Again, I don't think this is necessarily good because again, I'm kind of losing my shapes here. But for the purposes of the thing, we need to move on. Let's see. I'll go ahead and transform this one. And all I'm doing is I'm holding down. That's awful looking. But yeah, so let's go ahead and do that. Why not? I'm gonna hold down. I held down Shift with the transform tool to distort them like that. Ooh, totally awful looking. You can see I'm creating all these layers. And it looks awful, but we're getting there. And then I'll do one more layer, and then I'll use the Marquee tool to erase this part. So I'm gonna go ahead and transform this to go ahead and get this last section up here. And you can see I have all these layers that are just honestly awful looking. This is completely awful. So you can see I'm going to merge all those together. You can see all of those are just one piece now. So again, it's all the same thing. I went through that a little fast to speed up this part of the video. But all I was doing was holding down Alt when I was dragging a layer. Then I used the transform tool, Control T, and rotating things and moving things around and just kind of positioning things. Now, I don't really like the way this looks, but what's also common in a lot of Piet Mondrian paintings on top of that is they do a lot of line work as well. And what I would do in that case is I'd probably use your brush tool on another layer. You could use the Marquee tool as well, but I'm going to go ahead and use the brush tool for this, just to kind of mix it up. So you could use a Marquee tool on a different layer, but the most important thing is you put it on a layer at the very top. So if I hit Control-Shift-N, create a new layer, and I'm going to go ahead and use the brush tool, again the B key, Bravo key, and I'm going to go for a hard brush. Again, you can come up here and change it right here in the top left. But just to recap how you can change these by using the quick keys is Shift right bracket, because right now if I paint with this, it's a soft feathered brush. So I'm going to do that. Shift right bracket will harden the brush. So if I do that like 4 or 5 times, it's going to be a 100% hardness, which will be a crisp brush like that. If you want it to be black lines, undo that. Remember the D key, the Delta key, defaults your colors, your foreground and background color, back to black and white. There you go. Now I paint, it's black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my brush size smaller. And again, that's just straight brackets, nothing else. So no shift brackets hardness. And then regular brackets is just the size of the brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out outside here somewhere. And I'm going to draw a line. Click and hold. I'm going to hold down Shift. Remember that the same thing. It lets you draw straight lines across. Now, a lot of the other paintings, they do mixed line work. They have a little bit mixed, so you can do that. I welcome it if you want to do that. What I would recommend is you probably put that on a different layer. So what I could do at this point is maybe create a new layer. Maybe my brush a little bit smaller. And I'm going to draw a couple of these other lines. I'm going to start maybe right here. Click. And I'm going to go down. Maybe I'll do that for a couple of these. And I'm not going to get this perfect, so I'm not going to try. But I'm going to just try to showcase. See? There you go. That. And again, you can make as many layers as you want. It makes things easy. So for example, if I want to duplicate this layer, I'll hold down Alt. Drag this up. I can create a new layer. And now I have 2 of this thick line on different layers. So maybe I'll move this or rotate this by hitting Control-T, transform, and coming over here to where the transform tool is and kind of rotating it, holding down Shift. And you can see that looks pretty good there, but it's going through there. And all I have to do is on that layer, there's a lot of layer control here. I can switch to the Marquee tool or just use the straight up eraser tool. Make sure your eraser is probably a hard brush. So Shift right bracket, just erase it. If you go too far, which I did, undo, Control Z. You can see I can be sloppy because I have that other line. And if you're happy with these things, you can merge them. And then, like I said, it's very common to work with new layers. Control-Shift-N. Try new things out on that layer. So maybe I'll do this. I'll put this here. Oop, I just messed up. Put that here. Put this here. I'll just go all the way down with this one. And right now I'm just drawing to be quick. There we go. Do one across the bottom too. One off the side. So maybe I'll do something like that. And then maybe I'll do a couple small lines like right here. I went too far, so I did. Again, all I'm doing is holding down Shift while I draw this. Maybe I'll do a thick one over here. And if you're happy with it, this is how I typically work on my paintings at least. If I'm happy with it, I have a layer that I consider semi-final, because nothing's ever final. And I merge it to that layer. And then I start a new layer, Control-Shift-N, to try my new exploratory stuff on. So you can see, there we go. Somehow that got missed. There we go. Maybe I'll do a real thick line here. I'm going to put this on a different layer because I know it's not going to work. Or again, you know what? Let's use the Marquee for this. Just to show that you can use the Marquee tool as well. So you can also do the Marquee Tool. So yeah, I just did some various marquees here. There you go. I just merged those two layers, and I keep updating, merging my line layer. And here's my other random layer of non-groups. And then here's my original layers / groups of that original first squares I drew. Now, is this a spectacular representation of Piet Mondrian? No, it's not. But I hope we get the idea across. So with those techniques and a little bit more time than I spent, you can definitely achieve a Piet Mondrian style painting, and I look forward to seeing what you guys do. Um, but for that, I think you have everything you need when you go to create the painting. The last thing that you might want to do is make sure you save your stuff as two different things. When you save, file save as. Take note of Photoshop file, because you need to save your things as Photoshop files if you want to keep your layers. You can save as PNGs or JPEGs for flattened images, and that would be usually what you would use to turn in things or post it on sites. So I recommend saving out, keeping your source art as PSDs. That's crucial. Don't ever not have a PSD, and then saving out your images JPEGs as well for whatever you need them for. So you can see, I'm just going to go ahead and save this as a painting on my desktop, and keep that PSD always ready. So I think that's it. Have fun painting.